Dinner for shoes, please.
Hello. Welcome to an episode of Dinner for Shoes. I am really, really excited for this episode. This episode is actually like a dream come true for me, which is not only the reason why I do this podcast, but when I get to have a special guest on that I really admire, it's like emotional for me. So that is the situation with this episode, which is why last week I teased like, oh, this is going to be a really good one. I'm really excited for this. This episode is called George M. Johnson on Flamboyants, fashion and identity. And so George too really uses fashion to express themselves, and they like pretty much all of their outfits in a way, and we're going to talk about this in the interview, you'll see, but shows their progression of who they are and like to the fans and to their followers, which is really cool and really unique. So just by looking at their outfits, you are kind of like learning more of Georgia's story, which is what makes them have such cool personal style. And we do talk about that in the interview, so you're going to get to hear all about it. But George M. Johnson wrote All Boys Are in Blue, and I would say that I read that book about 6 months ago. I was really, really struck by it. I am so happy to say that I took it out of my local library in Hoboken. I'm happy that I live in a place doesn't even matter, because the fact that this book has been banned, I mean, the book changed my life. I can only imagine how many people can relate to so many of the sentiments that George writes about in that book and do not have access to it. George is trying to change this and definitely stands up to the federal law that bans books like theirs. Now, All Boys Aren't Blue has been banned in at least 29 school districts. In 2021, it was the third most banned book in the United States, according to the American Library Association's Office of Intellectual Freedom. This book was banned and has been challenged because of its LGBTQIA+ content, profanity, and sexually explicit material. George M. Johnson is not giving up without a fight, but as they say in many interviews, they feel like their job is just to share their story with at least one person. They say that as long as they've shared that story and they've gotten their message across to at least one person, then they've successfully done their job. However, they are on the Time 100 Next list. They continue to stand up in federal court against book bans, and they are coming out with Flamboyants. Flamboyants, by the time you are actually watching and listening to this episode, is probably out, so you can get your hands on it. I was literally so excited to get my hands on it before. Oh, hi babe. She knows. I was excited to get my hands on an advanced copy and read through it. Flamboyants, The Queer Harlem Renaissance, I Wish I'd Known, by George M. Johnson. And by the way, the illustrations in this book are part of the reason why I'm wearing the outfit I'm wearing today, because they are so bright and they have like a multitude of color to them, which is so important. Oh, my bookmark. I'm gonna need that because I have a lot of little segments I want to read, but I also folded the pages, thank goodness. So anyway, very colorful illustrations by Charlie Palmer, and I kind of feel like the outfit I'm wearing today, it's like, what's the word? When it's kind of like, iridescent. It's a little iridescent, which reminds me of the very powerful illustrations in Flamboyants, and I had to wear it because of that. The fact that these illustrations are so bright and beautiful, it's almost like they are rebirthing all of the subjects that this book is about. Each chapter is dedicated to a different subject that George wanted to retell with a modern story and give these people and these subjects who made up the Harlem Renaissance and were so famous and totally made a difference. They wanted to give them a space to shine with a new modern retelling of their stories. So that is what this book is for. I'm going to read a little bit from it. But let's start with the outfit behind the shoes. So as you know, I am wearing this outfit today. I actually rented it from Rent the Runway, and it's been in like my Rent the Runway cart for a while. And it's by Affirm. I think that's how you pronounce the brand, AFRM. And I loved, like, this cargo skirt is much, much too long on me, but I really liked this really cute little set. I feel like it really speaks to my personal style. I also have these heels from Zara. They're white. I did really wear them because they're sleek and beautiful, but I love the sculptural heel. They're a Mary Jane, and I love a Mary Jane because they keep my big wide fat foot in place. But a sculptural heel is just unique to me. And this episode is unique to me because George is such an incredible writer. Something that we also talk about in the interview that you'll see is that their words are, we talk about how, and this is my favorite type of writer, right? They can use big words to express important, powerful sentiments, but they also can string together words to express sentiments that other people reading the book need to know and might be able to digest in an easier way, but it's almost like poetry. George is also a poet, and they actually wove some poetry into this book. One of the poems I'm going to read to you because it actually summarizes the whole point of the book very well, and it really struck a chord with me. But yeah, they are such a unique writer in that way. So I had to, like, give a little nod with the sculptural heel that I feel is unique. Don't you think? Don't you think? I think she can tell that I'm emotional because she just really picks up on my moods. And I think she can probably tell that, like, this is a big episode for me. So she's here to give me emotional support. I love you. Oh, she says you're on your fucking own. Okay. All right. I'll just sit here and do the rest of the episode. But yeah. So anyway, that's the outfit. I also wore white shoes because I'm wearing my white floral bubble bar earrings. They have a little cluster of beads in the center that also reminds me of, like, the beautiful illustrations that Charlie created for Flamboyants. And yeah, so I'm going to go through and read a little bit that I want to read to you. I'm actually going to start with a quote from All Boys Aren't Blue, which really tells about George's upbringing, and it explores someone who grew up Black and queer, and it is such an important book. Like I said, it's probably one of my favorite books I've ever read. I would list it on my top 5 for sure. And there is, like, one page that I did circle because the writing really struck home with me. So I'm going to read that first. Then I'm going to read some of my favorite quotes from Flamboyants. Then you are going to have the pleasure of meeting George on Dinner for Shoes, which still, like, makes my heart beat fast. I am so happy that they decided to come on as our special guest. And then I am going to try George's favorite food, which is kind of like a new twist on Dinner for Shoes when I have a special guest on. And I'm going to explain to you how we are moving forward going to operate with the food when it comes to having on a special guest. But we'll get there after the interview. So let me first read to you this really beautiful quote from All Boys Aren't Blue. And I hope it makes you want to find and pick up a copy because you absolutely should. There are so many people who are young and out and looking for a support system. Build the support system that you want to have around you. This won't always be easy, I'm not going to lie. I won't sell you the fable of it gets better like media tries to do without offering how. The how comes in being willing to take a chance on yourself and create the support system you wish to have. I would also tell you to reclaim that campaign slogan and use it from a place of power. Tell folks, especially those who are non-queer and non-Black, to make it better. Something getting better doesn't happen without action, and you have every right to ask for that. And I think that is the most beautiful modern interpretation of the phrase, it gets better. And I remember that I reposted that on my Instagram story when I was reading All Boys Aren't Blue, and it's just still stuck with me to this day and is actually part of the reason why I reached out to George in the first place. So, okay, let me read a little bit from Flamboyants because this is George's new book. George is a New York Times bestselling author. So, I mean, you gotta read this. And in a lot of places throughout Flamboyants, depending on the chapter and depending on which subject George is writing about and had done so much research on in order to actually retell these stories and kind of in a way that speaks to how these stories supported and helped their journey. This is the Ma Rainey chapter. I really liked this one little segment from it. Ma Rainey wrote the song Prove It On Me Blues, and this is a line. Went out last night with a crowd of my friends. They must have been women because I don't like no men. People say this song makes open references to lesbianism and bisexuality. Some claim Ma wrote it after she was caught performing sexual acts with several other women from her performance troupe at her home in 1925. An advertisement for the song showed Ma dressed in a three-piece suit, mingling with women while the police were nearby. It was clear that Ma Rainey loved to show off the illegality of queerness. I love how people may not have been public about their sexuality during the Harlem Renaissance, found ways to express it in essays, songs, poetry, and other arts. They were leaving us a roadmap for the future. With each generation, we see how what was once done in silence and in the dark has moved toward the light. We now have LGBTQIA+ actors, writers, singers, rappers, dancers, activists, and more doing it all publicly. And every generation's efforts became a blueprint for the next generation to do even more. So that is a narrative that strings all of these subjects together in this book, just how these people did express themselves, although not publicly, because during the Harlem Renaissance, that wasn't part of culture, and they were not able to visibly be themselves. For many reasons. At the beginning of the Claude McKay chapter, I was really struck by this sentiment, which George does talk about throughout their writing and not just in Flamboyants. As someone who lives at the intersection of Black and queer, I've been told that my Blackness comes before my queerness, as if those two things can be separated when I enter a space, as if we must walk around as pieces of ourselves rather than whole people, as if our queerness will be a threat to our Blackness and the Black community as a whole. Claude McKay faced the same dilemma. So right there in that beginning paragraph, George explains what the ways in which they relate to Claude's story. And they do that throughout all of these chapters. And with all of these subjects that they studied, so deeply. So finally, I want to end, before you go and check out our interview, I want to end with the Zora Neale Hurston chapter. This is the last chapter of the book, and I think there's a reason why George decided to put Zora's chapter here specifically. So they write in the chapter, Zora said in her autobiography, Dust Tracks on a Road, I wrote Their Eyes Were Watching God in Haiti. It was damned up in me. I wish that I could write it again. In fact, I regret all of my books. It is one of the tragedies of life that one cannot have all the wisdom one is ever to possess in the beginning. She then went on to say, if writers were too wise, perhaps no books would be written at all. I know from now, I will come back to this book and think, I should have said this, or I shouldn't have said that. However, that's the beauty in writing. What I don't say now can be said in a new work years from now. What I get wrong here, I can get right elsewhere. But there is nothing to get right or wrong if I never sit down and take the time to dig deep into the pit of my soul to tell a story. So I really, really liked that. That is the way that George related to Zora's story, and just one small sentiment of Zora's life and what Zora expressed. And then finally, in the very last paragraph of this book, George writes, that's how we should honestly remember all of the figures in this book. Some of the greatest geniuses we may have ever known. I call them the Flamboyants. Their lives were full of color, wisdom, and experiences that shine brightly beyond the confines of their time. And then Flamboyants, the poem with the beautiful illustration, is on the very last page. So obviously it's up to you to pick up a book, to read the whole thing. If you want to learn a little bit more about George and about Flamboyants and about what went into writing this incredible book, check out our interview. Okay, so first of all, the first book that I read was All Boys Aren't Blue, and I loved it. And you are an incredible writer. So I just want to know, as someone else who's a writer, when did it dawn on you that that is what you could do and that is how you could channel your art?
That's so interesting, mainly because I went to school for finance, and then I have a master's degree in human resource development. So it's I always was good with numbers. So I was okay, I'm going to go into a field with numbers. And I did very well. And literally before I became a freelance journalist full-time, made the decision, I was the chief financial officer of a multi-million-dollar nonprofit organization.
Oh, wow.
And so I remember when I told my mother, and she was just like, I don't know about this one. I usually back you on most of your decisions in life because I know they could just kind of move how you move, but I don't know. But years later, she's like, okay, you was right. Like like I'm proud of you. Like you felt it and you knew it. I think though the most interesting thing was my mom sent me a text message probably about 6 months ago talking about how I said when I was 13 that I was going to be a writer. And I was like, I don't remember this. She was like, I never forgot it because she was like, it was you were writing, but you were trying to figure out your voice. And you were trying to figure out whether it was poetry you were supposed to be doing or what it was that you were supposed to be doing, but you had a gift for it. You just didn't know how to like actualize it. And so I guess since 13, I've been saying it, but I think it came into reality probably around 30. Well, I guess no, not 30. I think my first article came out at 20. What am I, 38? So around 27.
Okay.
So I was around 27, 28 when I like started to write. And yeah, it just was a realization that like I had a voice and I wanted to share it, even if I didn't know how I wanted to share it, but I felt like I had something to say.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I leaned into. Yeah, I was around 27, 28 when that happened.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad you figured it out because you definitely did. And I want to obviously talk specifically about Flamboyants. And I want to know, I mean, now you kind of like have kicked off your writing career and you've had these ideas.
Yeah.
How did you decide that Flamboyance was your next project? And also, how did you choose? I'm sure it was difficult, but how did you choose exactly which people you wanted to spotlight? Like, was there anyone who didn't quite make the cut that you're still so inspired by? Like, how did it all come to be?
Yeah. So, Mike, who didn't make the cut? Okay, the choice on doing the Harlem Renaissance. So, originally, All Boys Are in Blue got optioned by Gabrielle Union, and I'm still working on that project, but for television and film. And so from there, I started a production company with my best friend, Twiggy Pucci Garcon. And we started a company together called All Tea No Shade Productions. And we were like, we want to tell all of the queer stories. Like, this was great that my book got to tell this one, but like, what happens if we like go back and like tell the stories that have been missing? Yeah. And so we were like, let's do like an anthology series where we wanted to talk about like ACT UP from the Black perspective and the HIV epidemic. We wanted to talk about the Stonewall riots from Marsha P. Johnson and Miss Major and Sylvia Rivera's perspective. And we also wanted to talk about the Harlem Renaissance. And initially we were focusing on Stonewall, but I think what we realized was like, it might make better sense to try to focus on the period before it and then kind of make this series like bring it up and all together. Even though Stonewall we know is like the exciting thing because the Harlem Renaissance has been told in a way that's glamorous and fabulous but not queer. Whereas Absolutely. We know Stonewall has always been told as a queer story, even if it was told as a whitewashed queer story, it was always told as a queer story. The Harlem Renaissance has never been put in that place. And so we were, pitching ideas and the industry was being strange, and thank God the industry is kind of starting to come back around now. But I was like, what if I did it as a book? Like, what if I went about this to like actually do the research and all of this stuff first? Because if I do it as a book, then we at least have the stories, the research, everything is there. And then when we get into, if we can adapt it through optioning process, we have all the research is done, right? So it's like, let's try it this way and put it in the world. But then my mind always goes a step further. Like, I don't want to just do biographies. Like, I want to write poetry and I want to do illustration. I want these people to like pop, and I want these people to like have a different life for this new generation that they didn't get to have while they were alive. Many of them died poor, died in unmarked graves, died impoverished, died with no one really knowing who they were until other icons who we have today went back and did that work. And so I felt, as someone who gets looked at in many ways in LGBT community as a legend, an icon, whatever people refer to me as. It was like, that's my work then, because it was Alice Walker not who found Zora Neale Hurston, but who did that work to be like, we're going to make sure that we all understand that this woman was very, very important, right? Mm-hmm. And there were so many others who went back and did that work. And then it was like James Baldwin. We all know James Baldwin, but a lot of people don't know Countee Cullen. And it's like, but Countee Cullen was his 10th grade English teacher and was pivotal in the Harlem Renaissance, right? So it was like that work was being passed down.
Yeah.
And I felt that as a person who all of the works have been passed down to, it was my job to go back and make sure that their stories got told.
Absolutely. Well, I feel like, I mean, I have the book right here, but it is so colorful. You did pepper some of your poetry into it. Like, you can tell you're a poet. And like, I do feel like you did retell the story and you gave, so even if the book is just a start, it was a great, colorful start, and it's so important because this is like a fashion podcast mostly. And I know, because I can tell from your Instagram that you are inspired by fashion. I'm assuming Josephine Baker was one of the subjects here that did inspire you probably the most from a fashion perspective. You talk about like the banana skirt and the influence on Beyonce, but was there anyone else that you were inspired by during the process that then like influenced your fashion?
Yeah, I think like about Ma Rainey, like I think that there are times where what people may consider gaudy and camp, we consider like beautiful. And I'll be honest, like what people at times will look at on Black individuals as like, oh, that's ghetto, whether it's like when we have our grills in and we have our nameplate chains and we have like the rings on all of our, like gold rings on my, like I grew up, that was how I grew up in aunts. And my mom was a bangle girl, so bangles all the way up the arm, rings on every finger. Like, that's how we grew up. Nails done, hair done. Like, that's how we grew up. And it's funny because, like, to read about Ma Rainey and to see, like, that culture, like, that was something that she really put into the ethos for us. And then, like, to watch Black women in the 90s specifically, like, have that aesthetic, like, that was, like, a really beautiful thing. And it's also part of my aesthetic that I, at times, get into my gaudy space and I get into like my very flamboyant space. And so people like her, like you said, Josephine Baker, I think everybody else was a little bit more, or most of the people in the book were a little bit more demure.
Yeah.
As they would say, like, very demure, very, very mindful.
Very timely description.
Right. But yes, there were some who were in the book that like pushed those boundaries. And even like a Gladys Bentley, right? Like, I think, and people will be like, well, you don't dress like Gladys Bentley. I'm like, no, but Gladys Bentley being a woman who dressed in what we would deem as men's clothing, and me being someone, even though I'm non-binary, but before I identified as non-binary, just being male presenting, and I wear my heels, and I would like, her story became very much like I'm on the opposite side of that track, where my presentation doesn't necessarily match what the world sees as me. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that, but my most comfortable presentation is still this. So I think she inspired me in many ways as I was working on this to even go further in how I want to express myself that makes me most comfortable.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And how would you say in general, style has influenced your identity or helped you express your identity? And I know that's a broad question, so feel free to run with it however you want. But just like through the years growing up, or maybe if you even want to talk about a specific outfit, a specific moment.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because like I didn't really grow up thinking I had style per se. I just grew up knowing what made me feel most comfortable, even if other people didn't like it. And so I think about in All Boys Aren't Blue, the cowboy boots. Like I still have cowboy boots, and I also have high heels now too, boots. But cowboy boots were where it started. Like there was an expression in me that just wanted to have something with a heel that clicked on the floor like my mom's used to, and like my aunts used to. And that made me feel, whole. And that was my first like fashion thing was cowboy boots, and realistically. And I think that evolved though, like, with me growing up in Jersey, to Timberland boots and like the aesthetic of my community and the aesthetic of my area, whether it was denim shorts with Tim boots, or when me and my brother, we I got gifted like 4 pairs of wheat is the color they call it, but wheat construction boots, and we dyed 2 pair black, like with shoe dye, before Black Tims had even come out.
Yeah.
Like, we literally were like, you know what, we want them to be black, and so we took literally shoe dye and we dyed them ourselves. And I remember we went to school and everybody was like, they don't make Black Tims, but everybody also saw the M. They was like, but they real. We was like, we dyed our constructions, and then other people started dyeing them in our city, right? So it was like we already had like our own idea around like what our aesthetic was. And I think even my younger brother does dress better than me in my opinion, but I think I dress well, but he is really, 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 really great with an eye. He has a really good eye for fashion as well. And my older brother did too, may he rest in peace. Yeah, we made it like to our own, and like I think now for me it's evolved into an aesthetic where other people feel seen in what I wear, whereas before I just needed to make sure I felt seen in what I wore.
Yeah.
But now it's like when I wear certain things, there are so many people who see the videos and just like, this is fab, and they're like, oh my god, like I love this, like you're pushing up, like, because it's like it doesn't feel like you're like it. And I hate to say it because it's like, whether you have an agenda or not, it shouldn't matter how you dress. But for those who are like, this doesn't feel agenda based, it just feels fab. Like, like I see it, like I just get it. And me being in a fraternity, I'm an alpha, so there are times where they had struggles with things that I wore. But even now, like they'll see something and will text me and be like, that was kind of dope. Like they'll literally like, oh my god, like I saw that outfit you were like, that was fire. And I'd be like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I think I've helped other people evolve their own understanding of how fashion, one, shouldn't be gendered, and two, if it looks good, it just looks good.
Absolutely. I mean, that is exactly like what I preach, I feel like. And that's such a beautiful progression for you too. I'm just like so happy for you that you were able to like, you're even able to see it and describe it yourself. It's really cool. And I always have this conversation with people, but I just feel like there's such a difference between fashion and style. And like clearly from a young age, like you had style. You imagined those boots, before they were even a thing. So I love that. Now, as far as like working with maybe designers, or if you ever were like styled by someone on a shoot, are there maybe any brands that you feel like you really feel like yourself in these brands, and you also maybe respect them because of how gender neutral they are from a fashion perspective?
Yeah. That's a good question. I feel like I am... One, I'm always love Fendi because my mom, she's a Fendi girl. So it's like, and I love Fendi. Like
Me too.
Love Fendi, right? Yeah, like I like Fendi, but I also feel like at some point, like my aesthetic in many ways is like Chanel, Tom Brown, Peter Doe. Like I have just been fortunate to Terry Singh. Like I've been fortunate to be able to like, one, wear some of those things, APOTs, like smaller collections that are like fabulous that I've been able to wear, but then like also like understanding where I'm going.
Yeah.
And I think like at some point there will be a Met Gala where I'll be in Tom Brown or Chanel or Fendi, or, because I have started to learn like what works for my body. And also I'm willing to push the boundary in a way that I think most are kind of like, I don't know, they box themselves in. It's like, well, if trumpet style is my look, you're going to always see trumpet, or if corset is my look, you're going to always see corset.
Yeah.
If this is my look, and it's not a bad thing. I just think I'm more willing to explore capes, and I'm more willing to explore pretty much anything: gloves, capes, earrings, headpieces, everything. And I'm grateful that like my stylist Shannon Stokes pushes me. Like he really, really pushes me a lot of times past what I'm comfortable with. But it always comes out great.
Absolutely.
But as we continue to build, like it's just been a beautiful thing, and it's been beautiful for the people who get to view it. They're like, y'all have never missed. Like, and people say like, y'all never miss, and it's like because we really see each other and understand what we're trying to build with it.
Yeah, that's got to be a huge part of like a stylist-client relationship, 100%. For the end of the interview, I do want to bring it back to Flamboyants just because I feel like that is obviously what we're promoting and what you are going to be so excited about next week and when this episode airs. So tell me about what you think. Well, two things. One, why someone should pick up this book if you had to summarize it. And two, what you felt while you were writing it, or maybe if there was like some sort of learning or takeaway that you have from the experience of writing it.
Yes. One, people should pick up this book because it is not like any other historical book that's been put out there.
Yeah.
My ultimate goal is to always like, how do we evolve writing? How do we evolve publishing? How do we evolve how we tell stories? And so growing up as someone who had to read, historical stories, I'm a nonfiction buff. I love it. But the stories were very linear. I want stories that are 3D and 4D, that break the fourth wall, that push you past the imaginary limits.
Yeah.
That go into the imaginative space with some of these people who I can never ask these questions to. And I think that's what's so powerful about it, because in asking many of these figures these questions, you get to ask yourself some of these questions. So you're learning about these people and learning about yourself through a reflection of the lives that they lived. And I think that's super important, especially during the times we live in now where identity is being attacked.
Yeah.
So it's even more important that we know who we are and interrogate who we are. And these type of works and my type of works help you to do that type of work.
100%.
Second question was
like if what you felt while you were writing it, or any takeaways.
This was a very hard book to write. This was the first time I was writing a book not about myself or my family. So one, research is hard. So research can be hard. It's a lot of work. But the hardest part about this, honestly, was coming to the understanding that, especially nowadays, that there was a lesson in what happened to so many of them. One, that people's visibility grows faster than their wealth. And so society places these platitudes on us that are unfair at times when you become a public figure, because there's an assumption of your wealth. And because of the assumption of your wealth, there's an assumption of how you have to live and how you have to move and how you have to navigate. And many of them did the best that they could with what they had, but many of them died poor because of it. Yeah. But it was because of a standard that they knew they were being held to, which is the same standard that I feel many people go through today as content creators, as influencers, as actors and actresses, and just across the board. Yeah. When you hear people like Taraji or people like Monique or people just across the board say, like, listen, you see me in this movie makes all this money. I don't make all that money. But there's an assumption that I'm doing this well. Right. Simply because of my visibility and simply because I'm booked. Right. But that doesn't always end up what's in the bank account after you pay everybody and the stylist and the makeup artist and the this and that. So I think that was one of my big takeaways from the book. And that it's important that when we have people who are telling us what will happen to us, that we have to actually listen to them. Because Zora Hurston said, "We will, if you don't do something, many of us will die in unmarked graves, and we will die poor, and we will die with the world not knowing all of the work that we did during the Harlem Renaissance." And that's what happened until people went back to uncover it. And so I think it is important that when people like me are talking about book bans and others who are fighting certain things, that we take a beat, take a breath, and actually listen and realize like this is not just like a flash in the pan moment. That it's like, if we don't chronicle our history now, we may lose it all.
Yeah.
Because they almost lost it all. And in Zora Hurston not losing her manuscripts because somebody who just happened to know her, who was a police officer who stopped the fire and saved all of those manuscripts that we now have, that should let us know like how close sometimes we are to losing so much.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a great note to end on, and it's so true. I'm so glad that you chronicled these stories in this way for everyone, and I'm so honored to have met you. I don't know, like the first time I started reading your words, I was just like, this is like my dream person to talk to and meet. Like, you're an incredible writer. Like, keep writing in that real, authentic way. It's simple, but it like connects to anyone and everyone. You have like a universal voice. I don't know. It's
which
amazing.
Is my ultimate goal. And, you know, I haven't ever really talked about it. Like, because people sometimes ask, like, because people have, like, I've written articles and stuff. People like, you can write, like, we know you can write at an academic level with words and things. And I'm like, yeah, I can. They was like, but sometimes, like, you're writing, it's beautiful, but it's also, like, simple. And they're like, not to say that in a bad way. And I was like, well, you don't have to say that in a bad way. But I was like,
no, not at all.
I grew up with a grandmother who had to leave school around the 9th grade.
Okay.
And I remember growing up with her, and she would always ask me to like be like, you know, hey, read the medicine bottle to me, and I'd be like, okay, because the words were small. So I was like, she wore glasses. I was like, oh, maybe because she can't see it. And it wasn't until I was older that my uncle was like, part of it is that she can't like see it because it's small, but also part of it is that she might not be able to read it because she had to leave school so young. And even though your grandmother is one of the smartest people we all know, because she is also one of those people that are in this country who didn't have the privilege of graduating high school. Yeah. So she may not be able to always read every single thing that are big words, and she'll make mistakes in the way she speaks if she's from the South and all these things. And so I think that's what kind of like ingrained in me. Like, anytime I write a story, I'm also writing it in a way that I know that my grandmother can digest it.
I love that. I love that. I really love that. And your relationship with her was so beautiful. The way you portray it, depict it, illustrate it. So thank you so much for being on. Thank you for checking out my interview with George. Like I said, am just completely struck by them. And I am really so grateful to have met them, even if virtually. I hope one day I can hear them read in person or meet them in person. Now, let's get to the fun part of the episode. So basically, I decided, I know that I am like creative and often funny and just completely weird and random when it comes to choosing the food that I match up with the vibe of the episode, the fashion topic we're talking about, whatever. I decided that when I have a special guest on, since it's not necessarily the easiest to like match up food with a topic or even with like an interview, right? Like what the interview was, what we talked about in the interview. What I'm going to do is ask that special guest, as an honor to them, really, what their favorite food is. And then I'm going to try it from a new place where I've never tried it before, because I'm sure that I will share favorite foods with some of my special guests. But that doesn't mean that I've tried that food at one specific restaurant and whatnot. So George's favorite food is crab cakes. I love crab cakes. So this isn't going to be like one of those ones where I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to like this. I know I'm going to like this. Okay. I got crab cakes. I'm surprised Kit isn't over here. Kit must be in there. Trish, you want to come? So I got a crab cake. It's just an appetizer portion from Hamilton Inn because I know that Hamilton Inn is a really great spot. So I know that this crab cake will be delicious and it looks delicious. It looks fried. She smells the crab, the fish. It's not tuna though, bub. No, I want the first bite. Don't do this to me. Let me take a picture. You're going to be in it. No, are you serious? You're not eating that. Can you just like look at me? Like look cute. There we go. All right, let's try this crab cake. Let's get in here. All right. This looks really good. It's nice and thick, which I like in a crab cake. I was looking at some other restaurants in Hoboken and Jersey City that have like cool small versions of crab cakes, but I think like a crab cake, and I don't know if George agrees because it is their favorite food, but should be like meaty and hearty and definitely fried beautifully. I guess let me try one bite without this sauce. I would feel like This is a very thick, dense crab cake. If I'm having a crab cake, this is the type that I want to have. You're sniffing, but you're not. Let me try a bite of coleslaw as a palate cleanser. You don't like this, trust me. I love coleslaw. Love it. All right, now we're going to try with this. I feel like I should know what type of sauce I'm dipping in. Who like doesn't know that, you know? So this is a Pommery mustard, which I like mustard, so I think that's interesting. Let's try it. It is whipped. It is thick. It is like a little tart. That is beautiful. Wow. I love you. I'm sorry. I promise I'll give you a treat. I love you. I have to say, I am taking it as a sign that my baby, my bubby, Trish, was here with me on this. She's like, no, I'm not. Was here with me on this very special episode. I am so honored to have had George on as my special guest. I really hope that you read all of their works and definitely follow them. Follow everything that they're doing to stand up against book bans and eat crab cakes because it is a great food. And if you forget what your favorite food is or you never know what to say, maybe say crab cakes, especially if you're near me from Hoboken or Jersey City. Hamilton Inn is in Jersey City, but you can still attain it. You can get it. Okay, I love you. Say bye. Say we love you. We love you so much. All right, like, subscribe, tell your friends about Dinner for Shoes, and we'll see you soon.